It is an honor to join United Cities and local governments and leaders of local and regional governments who are committed to human rights. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for being willing to focus not only on issues that are of particular importance to your local community, but to universal values that are of critical importance to every community. The values embedded in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights are not fixed, static, or assured. They must be affirmed and defended by those who embrace them, and for good reason. These values are vulnerable and are indeed under attack throughout Myanmar. Cities, townships, and villages are being systematically targeted, attacked, and destroyed because those who live in them refuse to accept an illegal military coup and be ruled by a ruthless military junta that is accountable to no one but themselves. I've had the privilege of serving in public office as a state representative, state senator, and as a member of the United States Congress. My service was informed by my work as a human rights advocate, as well as a community organizer in neighborhoods of working families in my state of Maine. Thomas Tip O'Neill, who served as Speaker of the US House of Representatives, liked to say, all politics is local. He understood and advised those of us who practice the art of politics that to be successful, you must root whatever you do or aspire to be on what happens to real people in real local communities and neighborhoods. Concepts and principles must be translated into the everyday reality of daily life in local communities. As community leaders who are committed to human rights, you are willing to embrace these ideals not only as an aspiration or hope, but as a living, breathing reality. My job as UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Myanmar is to report on the reality faced by people from all walks of life in communities large and small throughout Myanmar. But the lives of those who live in these communities are not impacted by reports. They are impacted by the action or inaction of those who receive these reports. Tomorrow, June 14th, I will issue a special report on the impact of the crisis in Myanmar on its children. For the children of Myanmar, the junta's illegal coup has led to nothing short of disaster. I argue in my report that without a prompt return to the path of democracy and concerted remedial action, Myanmar's children will become a lost generation. Military attacks on civilian populations have displaced more than 260,000 children, who joined the roughly 140,000 children in protracted displacement and the more than 500,000 child refugees from Myanmar in neighboring countries. The junta has arbitrarily detained over 1,400 children. They are currently holding 61 children hostage, primarily because they cannot find their parents who remain at large. Junta forces have tortured at least 142 children since the coup was launched. They have beaten, cut, and stabbed children, burned them with cigarettes, forced them to hold stress positions, subjected them to mock executions, and deprived them of food and water. 33,000 children in Myanmar could die preventable deaths this year alone, merely because they have not received routine immunizations. 1.3 million children and more than 700,000 pregnant or breastfeeding women require nutritional support. 7.8 million children remain out of school. The suffering of Myanmar's children reveals the depths of moral depravity that the military junta is willing to sink to subjugate the Myanmar people. They are the most compelling reasons why the international community must be willing to rethink and reset its response to the worsening crisis in Myanmar. Let me be frank. The approach of member states of the United Nations to this crisis has failed, particularly for the most vulnerable. They are why it is time for the world to return its attention to Myanmar and commit to doing everything reasonably possible to ensure that Myanmar's children are able to enjoy fundamental human rights that most of us take for granted, starting with the right to live. Member states, regional organizations, the Security Council, and other UN entities must respond to the crisis in Myanmar with the same urgency that they have responded to the crisis in Ukraine. This requires a dramatic increase in humanitarian assistance and unequivocal regional support for refugees. It requires stronger and more unified targeted economic sanctions against the junta and their enablers, and coordinated financial investigations. It requires member states that have imposed relatively little or no pressure on the junta to reassess their positions and take action. It requires the Security Council membership to finally put a resolution forward for consideration, debate, and vote. For action by UN member states to be possible, there must be the will to act. The will to act can and must be provided by those who are represented by governments, those to whom these governments are accountable, their citizens. You, locally elected leaders who live and work closest to these citizens, are therefore in a critical position to reflect the views and values of your constituents to your respective national governments. I hope that you will look at this report. It will be available starting tomorrow on UN Human Rights Council website under Special Procedures. You can see this or any of my other reports by searching for me on this UN website. I invite you to follow me on Twitter at Rapporteur UN for ongoing updates and calls to action. And I invite your comments, your questions, and your recommendations. You can reach me directly at hrc-sr-myanmar@un.org. That's hrc-sr-myanmar@un.org. Most of all, I hope that you will advocate that your government will take meaningful action in coordination with other member states of the United Nations on behalf of the children and the families of Myanmar. Let us work together so that the values embedded in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights will prevail in Myanmar and in all places where they are at risk or under siege. The stakes for Myanmar's children and for Myanmar's future could not be higher. Thank you.